Somewhere in the world right now, someone is laughing at a joke they don't actually find funny. Someone is pretending to enjoy a conversation they secretly hate. Someone is changing the way they speak, the way they sit, even the way they smile, without realizing it. And the disturbing part is, you probably did it today too, because there's a chance your personality isn't really yours. Not completely. Maybe never was. Maybe the person you call me was built slowly, accidentally, by fear, survival, loneliness, imitation, and social pressure. And if that's true, then who are you underneath all of it? Or worse, is there anything underneath at all? From the moment you were born, your brain began recording patterns. Not truth. Patterns. What made people smile? What made them angry? What got you attention? What got you ignored? A baby learns very quickly that survival is emotional. Smile back and people stay. Cry too much and people leave. Be quiet and adults call you good. Be loud and suddenly the room changes. Before you even understood language, you were already learning how to perform. And this is where the illusion begins. Because most people think personality is something discovered. But psychology suggests something far stranger. Personality is often constructed, layer by layer, reaction by reaction, until one day the performance becomes automatic. Permanent. Invisible. A child who grows up around anger may become quiet and agreeable. Not because that's their true self, but because silence kept them safe. Another child grows up receiving attention only when they achieve things. So they become ambitious, productive, obsessed with success, not because they love winning, but because their brain learned that achievement equals love. And this is the part almost nobody talks about. Many of your strongest traits may actually be defense mechanisms. Your humor, your confidence, your independence, even your kindness. Sometimes they aren't expressions of identity. They're adaptations, survival strategies that became personalities. But then something strange happened. Scientists discovered that humans unconsciously mimic each other constantly. Without noticing, people imitate accents, laugh styles, body language, vocabulary, even political beliefs. Place someone in a room long enough, and their personality slowly begins bending toward the group around them. This is called social mirroring. But the deeper implication is terrifying. Because if your personality changes depending on who you're around, then which version is actually you? The confident version? The anxious version? The quiet version? The version your parents know? Or the completely different person that appears around friends? Most people assume they have one stable identity. But neuroscience paints a darker picture. The brain is less like a fixed self, and more like an actor switching roles to survive different environments. And sometimes the switch happens so seamlessly, you never notice it happening at all. Think about this. Have you ever looked back at old messages, old photos, old versions of yourself, and felt embarrassed? Almost like you were looking at a stranger? That feeling is important because it reveals something unsettling. Your brain is constantly rewriting who you are. Memories change, values shift, preferences mutate. The person you were 5 years ago may psychologically no longer exist. But your mind creates the illusion of continuity, a stable character, a permanent you. Why? Because without that illusion, human consciousness becomes terrifying. Imagine waking up every day feeling like a completely different person. No consistency, no stable identity, no narrative connecting your past to your future. The mind cannot tolerate that chaos. So it creates a story, a character, a self. But stories can be fictional. And then modern life made this even worse. Because now, personality is no longer just discovered socially. It's manufactured algorithmically. Social media quietly trains behavior like a giant invisible conditioning machine. People learn which opinions get rewarded, which personalities attract attention, which emotions generate likes. And slowly, millions begin reshaping themselves around algorithms they don't even understand. This is why people become different online. More aggressive, more performative, more extreme. The internet rewards caricatures of identity, not authenticity. And eventually, The performance leaks into real life. Someone starts pretending online long enough, and the brain begins adapting to the role. Not consciously, neurologically. This is where everything changes, because eventually you realize something deeply uncomfortable. Humans don't just fake personalities for others. They fake them for themselves. A person repeats, "I'm confident," long enough, and eventually they believe it. Someone repeats, "I don't care what people think," while secretly structuring their entire existence around approval. The conscious mind loves illusions that protect emotional stability, even false ones. But maybe the strangest example of this comes from split brain experiments. Patients whose brain hemispheres were surgically separated began behaving in bizarre ways. One side of the brain would perform an action, and the other side would invent explanations afterward. A hand reaches for an object. The person doesn't know why. So the brain creates a story. "I wanted it." But that wasn't the real reason. And scientists realized something chilling. The human brain often explains behavior after it happens, meaning your sense of self-control may partly be a narration system, a storyteller, not the true source of your actions. In other words, your brain may be improvising the character called you in real time. And this creates a horrifying question. If your personality is shaped by genetics, childhood, trauma, social pressure, algorithms, culture, fear, biology, and unconscious imitation, then where exactly is the real you hiding? At what point does conditioning end and authenticity begin? Maybe that line never existed. Maybe humans are less like statues and more like water, shaped by every container we enter. School shapes us. Parents shape us. Friends shape us. Heartbreak reshapes us. Even strangers leave fingerprints on our identity. A single humiliation can alter someone for decades. One compliment can change an entire future. One rejection can permanently rewrite a personality. And yet most people walk around believing they independently chose who they became. But then something even darker appears. Because if personality is flexible, society can manipulate it. Entire systems are built around this fact. Advertising, politics, religion, corporations. Every day, invisible forces compete to shape what you desire, what you fear, what you become. And most of it happens beneath awareness. Quietly, constantly, like psychological gravity. But this isn't necessarily hopeless. In fact, this may be the beginning of freedom. Because once you realize personality can be constructed, you also realize it can be questioned, edited, observed. Maybe the goal isn't discovering some hidden true self. Maybe there never was one. Maybe being human means constantly becoming, constantly adapting, constantly rewriting the story. The danger is not that personality is fake. The danger is believing the first version of yourself was permanent. Some people spend their entire lives trapped inside identities built during survival mode. The quiet child becomes the silent adult. The rejected teenager becomes emotionally distant forever. The people pleaser never learns who they are without approval. Not because change is impossible, but because the personality became familiar. And humans confuse familiarity with identity. So who are you really? The honest answer is unsettling. You are partly biology, partly memory, partly performance, partly adaptation, partly imitation, partly pain, partly survival. A moving collection of experiences pretending to be one stable person. And maybe that sounds terrifying at first, but maybe it's also beautiful. Because if the self is flexible, then transformation is possible. You are not forced to remain the person fear created, or trauma created, or loneliness created. The personality you have today may simply be the version of yourself that survived yesterday. But survival and authenticity are not always the same thing. And maybe this is why certain moments feel so strange. Those rare moments when you're completely alone. No audience, no performance, no social expectations, just silence. And suddenly, you don't fully know who you are anymore. Most people run from that feeling. They open their phone, turn on music, message someone, Anything to avoid the terrifying emptiness underneath the performance. Because if there is no audience, who exactly are you performing for? Maybe that's the real reason humans fear being alone. Not loneliness, but confrontation. The possibility that beneath every role, every mask, every personality trait, there may not be one fixed person waiting underneath. Only awareness itself. Watching, adapting, changing, forever. And the next time you hear yourself say, "This is just who I am," pause for a second, because it might not be who you are. It might only be who you had to become.